There are moments in life when everything changes. Not slowly, not in stages, but suddenly, abruptly, like a thunderclap that splits the silence in two. My name is Jonathan Levi, and what I'm about to share with you is not a debate. It's not about religion or philosophy. It's about truth. About what happens when the world you spent your entire life building collapses in an instant, and something far greater replaces it. If you've ever questioned the foundation of your beliefs, if you've ever felt an ache for something more, something real, I want you to stay with me. Because what I'm about to share with you might not just open your eyes, it might dismantle everything you thought you knew. Just like it did for me. I was born into tradition. Not the kind that fades with time or is optional depending on your mood. No. My life was shaped by generations of devotion, laws written in ink and practiced in blood, in rhythm, in silence. In our home, faith wasn't something we did. It was who we were. Every object in our house had a sacred significance. Every word spoken was weighed against scripture. My father, David Levi, was a stern but kind man who wrapped tefillin at dawn like he was putting on armor. My mother, Miriam, hummed psalms in Yiddish as she kneaded challah dough. And I, the only son, absorbed it all like stone soaks in rain, without question, without rebellion. It was not expected that I would question. It was expected that I would lead. From a young age, it became clear I had a gift. I could recite entire chapters of the Torah by the time I was 9. At 12, I was teaching boys older than me the intricate meanings buried in ancient Hebrew. By 15, I was studying Talmud from morning till night, revered by teachers and envied by peers. At 23, I was ordained. The community called me Rav Jonathan, and my words carried weight. People listened, not because they had to, but because I had answers. Because I projected certainty in a world of doubt. And deep down, I enjoyed it. I loved the admiration, the applause, the way people looked at me like I had it all figured out. But what I didn't realize then was that admiration is a seductive drug. And pride can wear a mask of holiness. Inside, I was starving. Not for food or money. I had everything I needed. But I was spiritually malnourished, clinging to rituals that no longer stirred my soul. I preached with passion. I argued with zeal. I spoke with conviction. But behind the pulpit, alone at night, I felt nothing. Emptiness. Like I was shouting prayers into a canyon and waiting for an echo that never came. I told myself it was normal. Just fatigue. Just pressure. But the silence grew louder. And eventually, I stopped expecting an answer at all. I memorized truth but never felt it. I carried tradition, but it never carried me. Have you ever felt like that? Surrounded by faith, yet completely alone? My son Eli was the first to say it out loud. He was 16 and reckless, full of questions I didn't want to answer. "Why do we believe this, Dad?" he asked. "What if it's not the truth?" I rebuked him, of course. Told him not to be foolish. Told him we don't question God's word. But the truth is, I had the same questions. I just buried them deeper. Because if I admitted the doubt, if I admitted the cracks, I feared the whole structure would collapse. And so I silenced him, not because he was wrong, but because I was terrified he was right. And that's something no rabbi, no father, no man wants to face. As time went on, the tension between us grew. Eli pulled away. I clung tighter. I tried to correct him, guide him, discipline him. But I never listened. I never asked what he was really searching for. Because if I had, maybe I would have heard the cry behind the rebellion. Maybe I would have heard what I had refused to hear in myself, that sometimes questioning isn't rebellion. It's desperation, a last hope that someone will answer. But I missed it. I dismissed it. And it would take a tragedy to shake me awake. On a scorching July morning, everything changed. I was delivering a sermon, one I had preached a dozen times, about the coming Messiah. The synagogue was full, men in black hats, women in modest dresses, children whispering in the back. I stood at the bema and opened the scroll, and as I began to speak, I felt something strange, a pressure in my chest, like the air itself was rebelling. My voice faltered, the words blurred, and before I could finish the sentence, I collapsed. Darkness swallowed me. I heard screams, then nothing. Silence. Cold. Black. And then something else. What came next wasn't a dream. It wasn't a metaphor. It was real. As real as anything I've ever touched or tasted or feared. And in that place, whatever you want to call it, my world unraveled. I saw things I can't unsee. I heard things I can't unhear. But more than anything, I met someone I had spent my whole life denying, rejecting, mocking. And in his presence, every layer of pride I had built was torn away. If you've ever been certain of something, absolutely sure, then suddenly realized you were wrong, you know the terror, the shame, the relief. I was about to encounter all of that, but not yet. That would come later. For now, I lay there, still, broken, waiting. If you've ever worn a mask for so long that you forgot it was a mask, if you've ever wondered what would happen if you let go of the image, the control, the religion, and simply told the truth, then stay. This story isn't about me. It's about what happens when the truth finds you, when it looks you in the eyes and calls you by name. What would you do? What would you risk? Would you listen or would you run? Don't go yet. This is only the beginning. I woke up in a place I didn't recognize. Not a dream, not a memory. It felt more real than anything I had ever known. I was standing alone in what looked like a courtroom, but there were no judges in robes, no witnesses in chairs. Just silence, blinding white light, walls that stretched forever, and a table, plain and wooden, in the center of it all. I wasn't dressed in my rabbinical robe or holding a siddur. I was stripped of every symbol of who I had been. It felt like being naked without being unclothed. Then, I noticed the figures across from me, people from my past, my teacher, my mother, a Christian man I once publicly ridiculed, a congregant I had humiliated, even my own son. They didn't speak. They just looked at me with something worse than anger, sorrow, disappointment, not for what I believed, but for what I refused to see. Their eyes said everything. You missed it. That was the message that pierced deeper than any accusation could. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend, but no words came out. My arguments sounded empty even in my own head. I thought about the hours I had spent preaching, the debates I had won, the theology I had mastered, and suddenly, none of it mattered. The Torah I loved had become my armor, not my truth. The law had become my ladder, not my path. I had used it to elevate myself, not to find God. And now standing in this place, I couldn't climb high enough. I couldn't speak loud enough. I couldn't prove my worth. I was undone. If you've ever felt like the image of yourself you created can no longer protect you, then you understand this moment. You understand what it means to be exposed, not just in front of others, but before truth itself. Then, everything stopped. A presence entered the room. I didn't need to be told who it was. I knew. Not with my intellect, not with my training, but with something deeper. He walked in, not as a judge, but as a brother. Not with thunder, but with a stillness that shook me more than any storm. He was clothed in light, but his hands bore scars. His eyes didn't burn with fury, they welled with compassion. Jonathan, he said, just my name. That was all. And I broke. I had spent years denying him, mocking his followers, arguing against his identity. Yet he stood before me, unflinching, full of mercy. I am Jesus, he said, the Son of God you denied. I wanted to scream, to object, to escape, but I couldn't move. Every wall I had built with tradition and pride came crashing down. Have you ever realized your greatest enemy was the one who came to save you? I tried to fight. I told him he wasn't the Messiah, that he didn't fit the prophecies, that our Messiah would bring peace, not division, that he was just a symbol for another religion. But as I spoke, I could hear the frailty in my voice. I was reciting a script I no longer believed, a child repeating lines with no heart. He listened without interruption. Then he spoke words I had taught, but never understood. From Isaiah, from Psalms, from the very texts I once used to argue against him. And for the first time they made sense, not intellectually but spiritually. I saw the crucifixion not as a historical claim, but as a reality. I could feel it, hear it, smell it. Blood, nails, wood, love. This was no doctrine, this was no legend. It was a collision between my sin and his forgiveness. And I knew he had died for me, even when I despised him. I dropped to my knees. The courtroom faded. My voice cracked. I was wrong, I said. I mocked you. I rejected you. I led others away from you. He knelt beside me, placed his hand on my shoulder, and said, "You are forgiven. Follow me." In that moment, I felt something I had never known before. Not duty, not law, not fear. I felt grace. And grace, once received, makes it impossible to return to pride. The scene shifted. We were suddenly in a garden. Simple, green, quiet. It smelled like home after a storm. He said, "Go back. Tell them I am the Messiah. Tell them I love them." Then he showed me two futures. One where I returned unchanged, keeping my status, my robes, my image, but empty. The other, where I lost everything, but walked with him. "I'm afraid," I said. "I'll lose my family, my synagogue, my name." He smiled. "But you'll gain me, and I am enough." That was the moment everything changed. I said yes, not out of confidence, but out of surrender. A yes that wasn't shouted. It was whispered through tears. The light grew. The garden dissolved. And I woke up. Machines were beeping. Fluorescent lights above me. My wife Sarah sitting beside me weeping as she whispered psalms. I could barely speak, but I forced out the words. "Sarah, I saw him. Jesus, he's the Messiah." Her face changed. Fear, confusion, disbelief. "You're tired," she said. "You're not yourself." But I was. Perhaps for the first time in my life. I tried to explain, but then the doctors came in. Flatline, cardiac arrest. My heart had stopped for over 3 minutes, and yet, here I was, alive, aware, reborn, not because I fought for my life, but because someone gave me theirs. The nights that followed were the loneliest I've ever lived. Alone in a hospital bed, machines humming, ceiling staring down at me like a blank slate. I whispered prayers, not in Hebrew, not from memory, but from the depths of my soul. "Jesus, help me. Help her see. Help them see." A chaplain gave me a copy of the New Testament. I opened it, unsure. It felt foreign but somehow familiar, like walking into a house I had never visited, yet recognized every room. I read Matthew, Romans, Revelation, and I didn't see a religion. I saw a person. I didn't read about doctrine. I encountered love, and for the first time in decades I cried. Not from pain, from peace. That peace didn't shout. It rested, quiet, unwavering, real, and I knew there was no turning back. When I was discharged from the hospital, the world outside looked exactly the same, but I had changed so completely that it felt like I had landed in a different dimension. I stepped into our Brooklyn apartment, and everything was frozen in time. The mezuzah still hung on the doorframe. Sarah's Shabbat candlestick stood silently on the counter. My study was untouched. Shelves lined with rabbinic commentaries, thick volumes in Hebrew, books I once worshipped more than God himself. I sat there in the middle of the room for hours, breathing, remembering, letting go. Every page I once clung to now whispered something different, not because they had changed, but because I had. I didn't feel rage toward my past. I felt grief for how close I had been to the truth, and yet how far I had kept myself from it. I didn't rush to make declarations. I needed to understand what obedience looked like now, what faith meant now. So I prayed, again and again. "Jesus, show me, teach me. How do I follow you now?" I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't teach sermons I didn't believe. I couldn't stand in a synagogue and denounce the very one who gave me new life. So I approached Ben, my assistant rabbi, a good man, honest, loyal. We had served together for years. I told him I needed to speak with the synagogue board. 7 men I had led for over 2 decades. Men who trusted me, men who loved me, or thought they did. I sat before them and told the truth. "Is it true?" Ben asked gently. "Are you talking about Jesus?" I looked him in the eyes. I had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times. "Yes," I said. "I saw him. He is the Messiah. I can't deny it." Silence, thick, heavy. Then came the accusations. "You're abandoning your people. You're destroying your legacy. You've been deceived." I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I had already stood in the greatest courtroom of all. I simply nodded. I signed the resignation papers in a small office that smelled like old coffee and memories. I handed over my tallet, and I walked away. The streets of Borough Park didn't look at me the same. Friends stopped answering calls, families crossed the street to avoid me. But even in the rejection, I felt anchored, because Jesus was enough. Sarah tried to be strong, but I could see her unraveling. She cried at night, holding the same prayer book she had used since our wedding. "We've lost everything," she said. "The synagogue, our life, our name." Our daughter, Leah, screamed at me, "You're not my father anymore, you're a Christian." And Eli, my son, the one who had always asked the hard questions, said nothing. But his silence said everything. I had never felt more abandoned, and yet I had never felt more secure. Because even in the storm, even as the waves crashed and the roof caved in, Jesus remained. "You will gain me," he had said. And in those nights of sorrow, I clung to those words like a lifeline. Because the truth is worth any price, even this. I found a small church tucked between a laundromat and a pharmacy in Flatbush. Humble, hidden. It wasn't grand. It didn't need to be. Inside, the pews creaked with age. The carpet was worn, and the air smelled faintly of pine and hope. Pastor Tom, a large man with a southern accent and a piercing gaze, shook my hand and said, "Welcome home, Jonathan. God's been calling you." That first Sunday, I sat in the back, unsure of everything. But when the music began, something inside me cracked. "Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee." My lips trembled, my throat burned, and the tears came. I had sung thousands of Hebrew songs, but I had never sung like this. That day I didn't sing to tradition. I sang to a person, the person who found me when I died. Weeks later I was baptized. The water was cold. The ceremony was simple. Pastor Tom whispered, "You've been born again in Christ." The congregation clapped. Some whispered. I heard one man say, "That's the rabbi who changed." And I didn't care, because now I had found the truth. I studied with Tom, verse by verse, through the book of Acts. I learned about Paul, once Saul, another man who persecuted Christians before becoming one of them. For the first time, I understood him, not as a biblical figure, but as a mirror. I was him. We were both defenders of law until grace knocked us to the ground. And night after night I knelt on my living room floor, whispering, "Jesus, I've lost so much. Give me strength." And he did. Every time. Sarah watched from a distance, confused, hurting. But she saw the difference. The sharp edges in me were softening. The judgment was melting away. One night she said, "You're different, Jonathan. I don't understand it, but I see it." We started having small conversations. She didn't believe, not yet. But she held my hand during prayer. That was enough. I began sharing my story, first in the church, then in the streets, in subway stations, outside shops, even near my old synagogue. Some spit at me, some called me a traitor, but some listened. One man, a middle-aged Jewish father, stopped and asked, "Why Jesus?" I told him everything. I quoted Isaiah 53, Psalm 22, and John 3. Under a streetlight, he cried. "I'll think about it," he said. I gave him my number. "Ask Jesus yourself," I whispered. I started a blog. Nothing fancy, just a simple website where I could tell my story. I didn't expect much, but within 2 months, over 10,000 people had visited. Jews, Christians, skeptics, curious readers from all over the world. Some sent hate, others sent questions. Many just said, "Thank you." One message stood out. A woman named Miriam wrote, "I'm Orthodox, but your story is making me doubt. I can't stop thinking about it." We met in a coffee shop. She wore a headscarf, sat with perfect posture, and barely touched her drink. She listened, quietly, for hours. I didn't preach. I shared. I gave her a New Testament and said, "Just read John. Not to convert, just to understand. Ask him yourself." She took it. And weeks later, she was still emailing me, still asking, still seeking. I knew Jesus was drawing her, like he drew me. My life is smaller now, quieter. Our apartment is modest. My days are simpler. But I wear a cross now, not to provoke, not to rebel, but to remember. Sarah comes to church sometimes. She still hesitates. still carries grief. But during prayer, she takes my hand. That's enough. I don't try to convert her. I just love her. I live what I believe. Because I've learned, transformation isn't shouted, it's shown. I don't preach to prove anything. I speak because I cannot stay silent. When you've died and met truth, silence is no longer an option. You speak. You live. You invite others to see for themselves. And that's what I do now. Every day. Whether one person listens or 10,000. Whether I'm embraced or rejected. I've seen too much to go back. Sometimes I look back on my old life with a strange kind of sorrow. Not regret exactly, because I know everything had to happen this way. But sadness for how much I missed. How close I was. How blind I was. I think about all the years I spent building a reputation, protecting a legacy, preaching sermons that never touched my heart. And I thank Jesus for breaking it all apart. Because if he hadn't, I would have never known peace. Never known grace. Never known him. And now, I don't want anything else. No status. No platform. Just him. That's the paradox of surrender. You lose everything and yet you gain more than you ever dreamed. I thought I was giving up my life. But what I really did was begin it. To the person watching or listening to this, maybe that's where you are now. Maybe you're carrying questions you're too afraid to ask. Maybe you've built a beautiful exterior, but inside, you're crumbling. I understand. I was you. I wore the robes, spoke the language, held the posture, and I was dying inside. You don't have to stay in that place. You don't have to fake it. Jesus isn't intimidated by your doubts. He's not offended by your questions. He's waiting, gently, patiently, not to destroy you, but to show you who he really is. And if you open your heart, just a crack, you might be surprised by what rushes in. It won't be guilt. It won't be condemnation. It'll be love. Relentless, undeserved, life-giving love. You don't need to be a scholar. You don't need a theology degree. You don't even need to have the right words. Just say his name. Jesus, if you're real, show me. That's enough. That's all it takes. Because he doesn't respond to eloquence, he responds to honesty. And if you've made it this far, if you're still here, I believe it's not by accident. Maybe he's calling you. Maybe this whole time, he's been right there, closer than your breath, just waiting for you to notice. The same way he waited for me. I had to die to see it, but you don't. You can start right now, wherever you are, whoever you are. He knows your name, and he's not angry. He's reaching, and if you've already believed, if you've given your life to him, then I want to ask you something. Share this story. Not for me, for the people in your life who think they're too far gone, too religious, too skeptical, too proud. They need to hear that Jesus meets people in synagogues, in hospitals, in visions, in silence. He found me, and he can find them. But someone has to tell them. Someone has to love them enough to speak. Maybe that someone is you. Maybe this story isn't just for you to watch. Maybe it's for you to carry, to pass on, so others can come home too. I don't know where this journey will take me next. I don't have a 5-year plan. I don't need one. I wake up every morning and say, Jesus, lead me. And he does. Sometimes into awkward conversations. Sometimes into miraculous ones. But always, always into purpose. I've never been richer in joy. Never been fuller in spirit. Never been more alive. And it all began not with a sermon, but with surrender. So if you're standing at the edge of belief, uncertain, afraid, I'm here to say, jump. You won't fall. You'll be caught. And you'll never be the same. If you've stayed with me until now, I want to thank you. Not just for your time, but for your heart. This hasn't been easy to share, and I know it might not be easy to hear. But I believe with every fiber of who I am that someone watching this right now was meant to hear it. Maybe you've been walking a long road with questions you were too afraid to speak aloud. Maybe your faith feels like a performance. Maybe you're surrounded by religion, but starved for truth. I get it. I lived it. But I'm here to tell you, there is more. There's someone who sees past your titles, your traditions, even your rebellion, and he calls you by name. You don't need to collapse in a synagogue. You don't need to flatline in a hospital. You don't need to lose everything to see what really matters. That was my story. But it doesn't have to be yours. You can start fresh, right now. Not with perfection, not with religious effort, just honesty, just surrender, just a whisper, Jesus, I want to know you. That's all it takes. And everything can begin to change. Not overnight, not without cost, but deeper than you've ever imagined. I didn't find him because I was good. I found him because he is good. And so can you. If this story moved something in you, don't ignore it. Lean into it. Open a Bible. Start with the Gospel of John. Don't read it to win arguments. Read it to find a person. Pray, even if you don't know how. Just speak. He's listening. And if you don't want to walk this path alone, you don't have to. I'm here. This community is here. We're walking it too. Reach out. Ask questions. Leave a comment. Let someone know. You're not a spectator. You're a soul. And this story isn't the end. It might be the beginning of yours. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for the truth. For more stories like this. For more chances to hear and be heard. For a journey that's not about religion, but about real life in Jesus. Like the video if it spoke to you. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not too far gone. That grace still reaches them. That love still finds people. Like me, like you. And above all, follow Jesus. Not a church, not a doctrine, a person. The one who knows your name and isn't afraid of your past. And if you've already made that decision, if you're following him now, then walk boldly, love deeply, share freely. Because there are people in your life who are one story away from eternity, one testimony away from hope. Be that story, be that voice. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to say yes, like I did, like countless others have. He'll do the rest. I want you to know something. You are seen. You are not alone. Whether you're doubting, deconstructing, or just daring to believe, you're not here by accident. I believe God brought you here for a reason. So don't let this end with a video. Let it begin with a prayer. Let it continue with a step. And let it grow into a life that's no longer defined by fear or pride, but by love, truth, and freedom. Until next time, thank you for letting me be honest. Thank you for letting me be human. This is not a platform. It's a family. And if you ever feel like no one understands, I want you to remember something. Jesus is closer than your next breath. And I'm still here, still walking, still praying, still sharing. So let's keep going, together. I'll see you soon. Stay brave, stay open, and follow the truth, wherever it leads.